Oh, sound. There we go. And there's the right. Okay, good morning. Forgive the background there. I know there's pretty harsh glare right there. Got one of my key studio lights just started flickering and burned out this morning, so we're making do with some emergency backup lighting back there to get some light on the set. We'll see how that works out, and I'll get that fixed later today. So, good morning, everybody. We did a show Saturday evening, Mario and I. It was it was all right. We had a topic we wanted to talk about, the swattings, and it was our Rumble Premium show. And for those of you that watched, we got way off track and ended up basically just telling war stories for an hour and a half, but I think we still had a pretty good show, had a good time. The audience seemed to enjoy it. Good chat. So this morning, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the Autopen scandal and why it's even worth talking about. So we've got this article. I hope you guys have heard a bit about this. We've got this article from New York Post. Biden used Autopen signature on many official White House docs, raising concerns over his awareness. Now, I suspect most of you are familiar with Autopen, and you'll have to forgive me. I usually don't groom myself on air, but my beard's a little scraggly right there. All right. Anyway. I assume most of you are familiar with the Autopen function. It's available through all kind of programs like DocuSign, Adobe Acrobat, so on and so forth. And it's used rather frequently for various contracts. I mean, I used Autopen when I bought this house a year ago. I used it again 2 months ago when I refinanced this house. I used it last week when I bought my new pickup truck. Autopen it's recognized usefully as a legal signature in most circumstances. So it's worth asking why would it be controversial that Biden used the Autopen feature? I'll even take that a step further. I'll point out Donald Trump has used the Autopen feature in his official capacity as president in this administration and in his original administration. Barack Obama also used the Autopen signature for stuff in the original in his administrations. So why should it be controversial at all that Joe Biden used the Autopen feature? And let me tell you, the concern here is that because of the nature of Autopen, there is a location attached to its use. So you are signing into a computer and affixing your signature to a document. The problem here is once you sign into a computer, you sign into the internet and you affix that signature, there's a record of the ISP of your location where you were signed into the computer that connects to that. And it appears that there were documents signed with Joe Biden's Autopen signature from the White House in D.C. at times when we know for a fact that he was in other locations. So the question that arises is not whether or not the use of Autopen as a signature is a legitimate signature of a document, of a presidential executive order, or what's really what's really in question now, the grant of extraordinary pardons. It's not a question of whether or not the signature is legitimate. The use of Autopen makes the signature legitimate. The question is whether or not Joe Biden was there to use the Autopen signature at all, right? And obviously the implication that goes with that is that it appears that someone else was signing on his behalf. So Biden used Autopen signature on many official White House docs, raising concerns over his awareness. Dozens of executive orders signed by former President Joe Biden were authorized with identical Autopen signatures, raising crucial questions about whether he was fully aware of what he was signing, critics say. The Conservative Heritage Foundation's oversight project uncovered the situation, prompting Biden detractors, such as Republican Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey, to suggest it could be used to challenge the legitimacy of orders that the 82-year-old former president signed, especially given the concerns about his cognition. So let me take you back in the Wayback Machine for a moment and remind you, remember when Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on her way out, right? She was in bad shape. She had some falls. She had some very, very serious health concerns, spent a lot of time in the hospital, was generally checked out for at least the last 6 months, probably 2 years of her term on the bench. There is no question, there is no controversy over the assertion that for at least the last year and a half to 2 years, that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was essentially just being propped up Weekend at Bernie style to hold down the seat and try and prevent Donald Trump from having one more Supreme Court justice to appoint, that she was not doing the work of the justice. She just wasn't, right? She had staffers, of course, hard left activist staffers working under her, writing her opinions, right? And that affected, those opinions affected the law. They changed the law, right? One of those opinions was related to things like Obergefell, Obamacare. And there's a very serious question as to whether or not those opinions were written by her, right? So we know that some of the opinions from Ruth Bader Ginsburg were just penned by her staff and essentially she had no input on. Well, that's an important concern. So now we're looking at the possibility that the President of the United States of America, for some period of the last 4 years, was essentially just having the equivalent of presidential staffers acting as the president. Now, it may be the case that we elected the president and he hires the staffers, but So now, I know a lot of you guys know that the presidency of Joseph Robinette Biden was at no point ever legitimate within the confines of the rules of the Constitution. And I've made the argument, I pointed out, okay, 2020 was stolen, but the fact of the matter is Donald Trump lost that election. And he lost that election because of his naivete, because Donald Trump operated under the assumption that the government and the processes of the government are legitimate and reasonable. And he lost that election because he failed to treat the government as the adversarial opponent of the U.S. Constitution that it properly should be considered to be, especially while it's in the hands of Democrats. So, but forget about all that for a minute and just, pretend for a moment that Biden was legitimately elected to office. And then ask yourself the question, even if that's the case, what is the legitimacy of orders given by Joe Biden if he didn't actually give those orders, right? So back to this article from New York Post. Dozens of executive orders signed. We got that. I am demanding the DOJ investigate whether President Biden's cognitive decline allowed unelected staff to push through radical policy without his knowing approval, Bailey said. Now, we can look at that for just a moment, and let's not forget that right before Biden actually left office, he did go up there and give a press conference and say, the new amendment to the Constitution has been ratified, what was it, the Protecting Freedoms Amendment or whatever, and it hasn't. It absolutely hadn't. No such creature existed. Sergeant Major says Tammy Hall lives, but I believe he meant Tammany Hall. And yeah, basically. So former President Joe Biden faced concerns about his cognitive wherewithal during his presidency. If true, these executive orders, pardons, and all other actions are unconstitutional and legally void. So I would say that perhaps not all the actions, executive orders and pardons, there is such a thing as constitutionally legitimate actions, with which we do not agree. There are authorities and powers that the president has that constitutionalists, we may not agree with the use of those powers, but that doesn't change the constitutional legitimacy of those powers, right? Dark Woods Presents asks, where do you live? Freaking Maine. It's 4:30 in the morning here. No, I live. No, we are coming to you from the middle of somewhere of nowhere, but further south than Maine. But yes, East Coast time. So, but 4:30 in the morning, you got to be up. Yo, it's 7:30 in the morning. Day's half over. You got to get up. So, if true, these executive orders, pardons, and all other actions are unconstitutional and legally void. One of the Autopen signed orders from Biden was an August 2022 directive, meant to safeguard abortion access during emergency situations, Heritage said. Okay, I have to ask this question. Abortion access during emergency. What is your concern that a new mother won't be able to murder her babies in the middle of a hurricane? The emergency situation, sweetheart, you have greater concerns than where you will conveniently dispose of your inconvenient child. Okay. Another was in December 2024, an order to close government offices to honor late President Jimmy Carter. Okay, that's declaring declaring a one-time federal holiday to memorialize a passing president, to memorialize the death of an American president. I don't see much controversy to be had there. But the Post conducted a random brief scan of about 36 signatures of executive orders in the Federal Register from President Trump, former President Barack Obama, and Biden at various times of their presidencies. All three men's different signatures did not appear to change, although the Post's review was briefer and less comprehensive than the Heritage Foundation. The former president had been seen signing documents repeatedly throughout the course of his presidency. Autopen signatures were produced by machine instead of being done by hand. Scores of presidents dating back to at least Harry Truman are believed to have leaned on the modern Autopen. We gathered every document we could find with Biden's signature over the course of his presidency, the Oversight Project said last week. Good, I'm sorry. Whew. All used the same Autopen signature except for the announcement that the former president was dropping out of the race last year. For investigators to determine whether then President Biden actually ordered the signature of relevant legal documents or if he even had the mental capacity to, they must first determine who controlled the Autopen and what checks there were in place. So there is a big concern. Oh yeah, happy St. Paddy's Day, guys. Thanks, Steve. And good morning, brother. So there's great concern there that basically what happened is Joe wasn't there. And we know that he signed some of these documents while he was in another location. Well, Donald Trump put this out on Truth Social, and it's being retweeted around X this morning. Hello. Share this tape. There. Damn. It's going a little lag there. So Donald Trump says the pardons that Sleepy Joe Biden gave to the unselect committee of political thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact that they were done by Autopen. In other words, Joe Biden did not sign them, but more importantly, he did not know anything about them. Now, I love the Donald. I love you, brother. I do. I will say this: it very well may be the case that Biden didn't know about some of the pardons. I suspect he knew about the ones for Hunter and his family, but there is enough corruption floating around there that it would not surprise me to learn that basically, because Hunter was spending a lot of time in the White House toward the end of the administration. Hunter was basically living in the White House and kind of tending to Joe by the end of the presidency, and was essentially the de facto chief of staff for a lot of that end of presidency. So it may be that Biden didn't know anything about any of the pardons. I'd be a little surprised to learn for sure that he didn't know anything about, at a minimum, Hunter's pardon. But a lot of bizarre pardons went out, right? It's not bizarre for a president to pardon political allies, even those that have done quite a bit of wrongdoing. But right toward the end of the administration, Biden pardoned or commuted the sentences for every single federal death row inmate, with the exception of 2 that were there on specific terrorist charges. And we did a show where we went through and detailed what these guys were on federal death row for. And the thing about them, they were all, the vast majority of them had been put on federal death penalty after they had been convicted and sentenced to an extraordinary term. And then after they had been convicted for whatever crime they had been convicted for, there were bank robbers, mass murderers, child traffickers, serial rapists. I mean, bad dudes that probably should have been sentenced to death for what they originally did and were convicted for. But then while they were in prison, they assaulted, they beat, and murdered federal prison guards, other inmates, police officers, law enforcement, right? These guys were bad dudes. And a lot of them were wrapped up in some child trafficking stuff. And Joe came in and swiped the pen and cut them all loose. Well, okay, in fairness, he took them off of death row. He just decided, we're not going to execute these guys. He gave them a substantial reprieve. Hey, real quick, Uncle Steve, I see you there. Good morning. Thanks for joining me this morning. I'm going to be over in Griffin this afternoon. I'll give you a call after I get moving. I got a couple of things handled right after the show, and then I'll give you a call once I'm on the road. So, but what Donald Trump says here, I'm not sure. I can't say how much how much force of law this has as a tweet. But of course, Trump has a great deal of authority to take actions like this, or to direct his DOJ to take the necessary actions to vacate and remove the force and effect of pardons. Because remember, the pardons that are in question here, of course, you've got Hunter, but you've got Chuck Schumer, you've got Fauci, Liz Cheney, you got all the people on what Trump calls the unselect committee, the J6 committee. They all got these preemptive pardons. And there's a couple of things there. Like I was saying a moment ago, it's not unusual or bizarre for a president to pardon his political allies on his way out of office. It's in fact a very common thing. And we when Trump was leaving office the first time around, we talked about some of those pardons, and there were legitimate concerns about some of those pardons that were clearly political, but that's very much a tradition of the office. I'd be amazed if you could find a president that didn't pardon anybody, let alone have a handful of kind of questionable pardons. But the pardons that Joe Biden issued on his way out were unique in a couple of ways. And what's interesting about them, when Donald Trump was on his way out of office the first time, the media ran this absolute firestorm of speculation over how Donald Trump was going to use the pardon power to preemptively pardon a bunch of political allies, political supporters, and his personal friends and family members, with these just massive blanket preemptive pardons. And he didn't. He did not do that. But that's exactly what Joe did, right? The pardon he issued for Hunter covered a period of 11 years. In fact, the pardon he issued to Hunter covered the period of 11 years for anything he may or may not have done, for anything he may or may not have been accused of, just full pardon for all crimes that could possibly be conceived of. And that pardon actually extended past the time that it was signed by like 6 or 7 hours. In theory, there was a period of 6 or 7 hours where Hunter Biden had the authority to commit any crime with no exception, rape, murder, drug dealing, child trafficking. He could have done anything he wanted for about 6 or 7 hours with witnesses and discussed it openly and have plenary permission to conduct those activities. I'd be interested to know what he got up to in those 6 or 7 hours, but we haven't seen any reporting on that. But he did that. But Biden did this for Fauci and Schumer and a bunch of other people, where he issued this broad sweeping pardon that basically it just says, because I'm the president, I've decided that no matter what kind of crimes these people got involved in over the last 7, 8, 10, 11 years, they're pardoned no matter what. And you can't bring charges against them for anything at all. That's insane. That is unprecedented. And when we covered this when he was issuing the pardons, and we went back and pulled the clips from the end of Trump's presidency, when a bunch of Democrat lefty propaganda talking heads, they brought out their, here's an expert constitutional lawyer from XYZ Ivy League University, and explained, oh no, the Constitution doesn't allow for this kind of an authority. It would be totally unprecedented. It's never happened before. When Donald Trump starts issuing these blanket pardons that just don't allege any crime, then it doesn't work. They're meaningless. They don't have any force of law. You cannot pardon somebody for a crime that has not been alleged. That was the argument that they put forward. And then that is exactly what Biden has done. He didn't just pardon them for crimes that were not alleged. He did not allege that there were any crimes to pardon. But when they had their constitutional scholars come out and talk about the prospect of Donald Trump doing the same thing, right? They always like to say Donald Trump claims without evidence. Well, this was a claim without evidence. Donald Trump never said that he was going to issue blanket pardons for his friends and families, and he never did. This was one of those things like when Stephanopoulos asked old Mittens, "Oh, well, what about what do you say to those who have told us that you plan to abolish all birth control?" And Mitt Romney's looking was like, what the hell are you even talking about? That nowhere is that an issue, right? They're trying to inject it. They're trying to create a narrative there. They're trying to manufacture the narrative there, right? And Sergeant Major, to answer your question, who decides who is an expert? It is the government cheese censorship Pravda industrial complex that makes those determinations for us. We have a tyranny of credentialism, and the credentials are designed by people who are not qualified to assign credentials beyond the fact that they state that they are. Essentially, they have the ear of the controlling interest in the monopoly on violence, and we stare down the barrel of that gun every single day. So we're looking now at a legitimate interest, a legitimate concern that Joe Biden did not pardon anybody on the way out of office, and nobody can tell you who did. It could very well be the case that it was simply the cabal of Democrat election meddlers who went in there and abused the fact that they had physical access to the Autopen and pardoned themselves. So for the Donald to come out with this tweet and say, hey, the pardons that Sleepy Joe gave the Unselect Committee and political thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact, that they were done by Autopen. In other words, Joe Biden did not sign them, but more importantly, he did not know anything about them. The necessary pardoning documents were not explained to or approved by Biden. He knew nothing about them, and the people that did may have committed a crime. Therefore, those on the Unselect Committee who destroyed and deleted all evidence obtained during their 2-year witch hunt of me and many other innocent people should fully understand that they are subject to investigation at the highest level. The fact is, they were probably responsible for the documents that were signed on their behalf without the knowledge or consent of the worst president in the history of our country, crooked Joe Biden. Damn, son. Damn, son. Yeah, Be Controversial says a quick executive order to take an action to honor the passing of a former POTUS. Fine, he can approve the Autopen by phone. And I can agree with you generally, but forget about the approve the Autopen by phone. If it's a quick executive order that he can sign by Autopen, then why can't he use a laptop? Why can't he log into a laptop and sign it from the location where he's at so that there is an electronic record attached to that electronic signature that guarantees that the signature happened in the same physical location that the president was concurrently co-located? Right? See, that's part of the issue right there, is some of these signatures happened with the connected service address showing the location of the internet access point where the Autopen signature was signed, and that location is not where Biden was. Right? A signature's made in Washington D.C. while he's in Pennsylvania, right, or what have you. Legion says Trump needs to finish something on his plate before he goes back to load up at the shit buffet. And B says if he was asleep at the beach, you mean like this? Yeah. So yeah, there are some serious questions that need answers here, and I'm going to say I'm cautiously optimistic because let's face it, frankly, even if nothing comes of this scandal and Trump said that the pardons are basically revoked in this truth post, and that works for me. But let's say for just a moment that DOJ, the judiciary, pushes back and says, no, you can't just void pardons like that. And hey, fair play. the usurpation of additional authority by an executive is a concern that's worth addressing. I remain cautiously optimistic in this regard because in many cases here where these people have been pardoned, they've essentially had their Fifth Amendment entirely revoked. And I do mean entirely revoked, right? So there's legal precedent to suggest that once you've made a deal with the prosecutor, whatever, for lighter sentence, lighter charges, hey, you've been offered immunity on these charges in exchange for your testimony. Well, now, since you are immune, it's no longer the case that you can argue the Fifth Amendment, because the Fifth Amendment, we like to say we have the right to remain silent, but when you get into a courtroom and you're trying to invoke your right, what the Fifth Amendment is you have the right not to self-incriminate. Now, never talk to cops. That's because while you don't have the right to remain silent per se in this context, it's you have a right not to incriminate yourself. You have to remember that, they'll give you the Miranda warning, which they don't have to give you the first time they talk to you. And that's a whole other topic. Cops are tricky. They're trained to be tricky. Anything you say can and will be held against you in a court of law. And more importantly, nothing you can say can help you if you find yourself in court, right? But that's when it's still possible for you to incriminate yourself. If you are immune to charges because of a deal you've made, or in this case, because of a presidential pardon, then you cannot incriminate yourself on that topic, on that subject, right? Well, we're not talking about people who have been offered a specific immunity within the context of a broader and larger corruption scheme, conspiracy, et cetera, et cetera. No. These pardons that Joe Biden issued to these people are blanket. You are pardoned for everything and anything that you may or may not have done over an extended period of a decade, which is essentially saying you're immune from charges. And it was made very clear that the whole point to that immunity was because they expect Donald Trump to go after them and investigate them and prosecute them for the crimes that they committed in conjunction with the conduct of lawfare and corruption and money laundering as part of the Democrat machine and the Joe Biden presidential campaign and eventually the Kamala Harris campaign. Which means, right, with a pardon like that, you cannot be prosecuted for anything. That means you no longer have a Fifth Amendment right because you cannot incriminate yourself. Now, all of a sudden, you can absolutely be compelled to testify, even if that testimony would otherwise be self-incriminating. Even if it can't be self-incriminating because you've got that blanket immunity. Legion says Darkwood said his dad can beat up your dad. What is our response, Chris? Bring it on. I'd watch that fight. Give us a call, sweetheart. We'll set it up. We'll do it live. Beer and chicken wings. Hell, I'll step in the ring with you, Darkwoods, and we'll have we'll make a whole event out of it. It'll be excellent. Now, fair warning, as Legion can attest, my two favorite maneuvers once we get into the ring are the I weigh twice as much as you and the date rape choke. Big guy, big hands. I'll ask you for my money. So, on that, I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in it. Got to get down the street. Like I said, Uncle Steve, I'll give you a call in about an hour or so, half an hour or so, once I'm actually on the road. But for the rest of you, thanks for watching this morning, guys. Love you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, I didn't do the thing and set up the. Gotta. Yeah. There. And since Mario's not here this morning, ciao. Nope, I'm back. I'm back. Okay. Real quick, and I'm going to hit the outro again and listen for it. But guys, do me a favor, real quick, as I'm hitting that outro a second time. It stuttered in my audio here. The audio from the outro stuttered in my studio monitor. So I'm going to play it again. Y'all let me know in the chat before I cut the live stream off if y'all are hearing an audio stutter when the outro rolls there. Appreciate you guys.